How's that tea?
Oh my god, it's so delicious.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What tea are you drinking?
Earl Grey.
Earl Grey.
With honey and some vanilla oat milk.
Okay. That sounds pretty tasty.
It's sensual.
It's sensual.
It's sensual. It brings a lot of pleasure to my body, this tea.
Okay. Tell me.
This is like the tea that I have when I wake up in the mornings. I'm like, I love the notes of it. I used to have an Earl Grey tea that would have lavender in it. That really did it for me.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is like not as good as the lavender?
The lavender is an improvement.
Okay.
But this works. This is amazing. It makes me feel, I don't know, like I'm soft and
You're feeling soft
supple and
and supple. Lovely.
a little old, honestly. There's something about Earl Grey that makes me feel like an old, wise woman.
Yeah, it does feel a little like old person.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Wisdom.
I'm an old person at heart.
Wisdom.
Yeah, I'm a sage.
Yes.
I'm a sage.
Yes, the sexy sage.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm going to put my foot there.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm still processing this like sickness, so this like nasally feeling is like driving me crazy.
Cold tones.
But yeah, other than that, I'm excited to be launching this. I'm excited. This is the first one that we're recording, first episode that we're recording properly. And yeah, I'm excited to tell our story. I'm excited to talk about how Sex.Prayers even like landed in our bodies, in our being.
Yeah. And
yeah, just have these conversations and have them recorded in this way.
Yeah, and share them.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this is really how this came about, is we were having really beautiful conversations with each other and recognized the value in it and wanted to essentially we wanted these conversations recorded because we felt the value in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, why don't we just do that?
Yeah. And we started with voice notes. Like we started with little voice notes. We started with Instagram Live, like letting our audience know, hey, what's up? This is kind of what we're talking about. And I loved the Instagram Live experience because my audience is very chatty.
Yes.
They love to comment. Shout out to my audience. I love y'all. They love to comment and feedback. And it was beautiful to see something that I remember the first time we talked about. It was even before Sex.Prayers landed for the idea of Sex.Prayers, but we were just talking about intimacy and connection. It was like one of the first couple dates that we had. And I remember we were laying in bed. We're just like, oh my God, nobody's talking about this. Like, we need to share this because it felt like such an important conversation. And we wondered how other people felt.
Yeah.
And we were like, we should do something like this. And I think the idea seemed a little like kind of out there. And like, are we going to actually take it on or not? And then Sex.Prayers landed. I was like, oh, I actually think we're doing this. Like, we're doing it.
Well, like, some of it came from, you know, like, after having sex, the intimacy was already high, but then there's this nice afterglow, which is, you know, the name that we came up with, where we're having this opportunity to have these really connected, intimate, deep, meaningful, beautiful conversations. Yeah. It's like, this is gold. This is so lovely to have this, and why isn't anyone else sharing this? Yeah. So it's nice. I love the organic but rapid growth that we've been on with this.
Me too. It seemed, I remember feeling the energy of it, and I mean, we even have a notebook of downloads that we've received. It's like Sex.Prayers. We got to write it in the notebook. And there's so much there in those. There's maybe like 4 or 5 pages. But I remember just as we were thinking about it and conceptualizing it, how quickly it was like, oh my God, this is a workshop. Oh my God, this is a retreat. Oh my God, these are independent classes. Oh my gosh, this is a podcast. YouTube channel. It was just like everything was just coming all at once, that it felt, for me, it felt almost unavoidable. It was like God being like, no, you are birthing this. Like, you're birthing this. It was so, our conversations were always so deep and so connected naturally that we were living sex prayers before we
It was
even
a thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So what do you mean by sex prayers? What does sex prayers mean to you?
I love that. Sex prayers for me is just like a way of really looking at sex, and this is both like the act of sex but also my sex and how I relate to my sex and my sexuality as prayer, you know. So I am the type of person where I really do look at all of my daily actions as a form of prayer, you know. So depending on how I show up for that depends on what manifests in my reality. I really do believe that. And so when I look at my life as a prayer, sex is a part of it, and how I connect to that part of myself.
And by prayer, do you mean communion with God?
Communion with God, communion with life, communion with the mystery, the landscape. I mean, it's communion in totality.
So communion in that which exists beyond you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Like I had a walk the other day. You know, I went for my walk in the morning, and I'm really reflecting on this like God is love thing, and I'm walking in this Amsterdam circle, and I'm looking at everybody. Some people are making eye contact with me. Some people aren't. You know, I love the people that are like, buenos dias. I'm like, yeah, what's up? That's love. God is love, you know? And I was thinking about it like that. And then even the people that wouldn't make eye contact with me, I was like, that's also love. And it was funny because in a new city where I feel a little bit stranger to the immediate environment, it could be easy for me to get wrapped up in insecurity. Like, they don't know that I'm the new person, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm new here. Oh my God, I don't know anybody, you know? And just getting into that mode of like, God is love. Everything is love. And we'll talk about this in, I'm sure, some of our podcasts, this whole love consciousness piece. But being like, oh, even that is like, God is love. You know, like there is nothing beyond that. And when I can tap into that frequency, that's when I feel like my prayers are really alive. It's like I am in the dance with life. And that's what sex prayers is to me. It's just like a chapter of the bigger prayer.
Right. It's the sexual element of that. And I think that's really how this...
I was listening, my hair tie just went flying. I don't need it.
Let me retrieve that for you.
Thank you so much.
You're so very welcome. That's really, I think, where this birthed from, at least for me, is I'd been on this journey the last, I don't know how long, definitely in a very conscious, focused, directive way, last 6 month year of my sexual practice being more than just the physical act, of it being more than the immediacy of pleasure, this this element of transcendence to it, and being able to connect with that element of divine, of God, through sexual practice. And that's where this for me came from. It's bringing God back into the bedroom, rather than being so fixated on the gratification aspect of it, which I think for a lot of people, at least the way society perhaps views sex, is that it's about gratification, not necessarily about divine communion. And that's what I really appreciated about our connection, was that it felt like you were coming from it in the same way. Like there was this, like you love pleasure and you love sex, and you know, that's obvious and evident and beautiful, and I love that, obviously.
I love it, you guys. I love it.
She does. She really does. Well, I don't think I could be with someone who didn't.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very challenging. Challenging.
I love that about us. And there's this part of you that, like going for the walk, like connecting with nature, like connecting with people, you see the transcendent element in it, rather than just the immediacy of it.
And I had heard stories about it, and I'm like, if other people are having these ecstatic sexual states, like it can't not be possible for me. Even being like, even having trauma as a kid, especially around sexuality, I always wondered, maybe 8 years ago, like, am I ever even going to have an orgasm? Like, what is this about? I would experience pleasure from sex, but I wouldn't experience fulfillment. And even as you were talking about that, about like the whole gratification piece, a question that comes up in my mind is like, realistically, I wonder what percentage of people would actually say that they're happy in their sex life, that they feel gratified or fulfilled in their sex life. Because it's one thing to experience penetration and go, I like penetration, but are you actually having the full experience of what sexual connection can be?
Yeah, and I think that comes more deeply, no pun intended, with the focus being on divinity first, the focus being on presence and honesty and truth and communication. With all of that, with that transcendent element to it, then invites this beautiful, deep pleasure.
Yeah.
And I think people have it the other way around. It's like, got to focus on the pleasure, and I'm not getting that. But I'm missing this whole other aspect to it. And
yeah. Also, this embodiment piece. I feel like embodiment, especially now, embodiment is so necessary for being able to expand pleasure states. Because I feel like if I wasn't fully embodied, aka like in tune with my body, and knowing the signs, knowing the signals, being able to register and like have a conversation with my body, that makes sexual experiences, or made sexual experiences, so much more challenging, because I didn't know what turned me on. I knew what turned me off, but also at that time I wasn't feeling empowered or embodied in my boundaries enough to even say, I'm actually not enjoying that much. And I love that this kind of like leads into this, one of our pillars pieces that's like communication, and we can get into that in a minute. But yeah, like having communication and being able to know my body deeply, be able to express the needs and wants and desires of my body and also my mind. And then also being open enough, because I feel safe enough in my body to receive what it is I'm being offered, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's because of that attunement, that connection to sensuality, that invites the fulfillment in sexuality. It's like, from my experience of our like first encounters was that where your interest was of course in connection, but it wasn't in sexual gratification, it was in sensual stimulation. And the essentially, like, for me, that is the connection to truth. It's like, what am I experiencing in this moment? What would I like to experience in this moment? What is the sensation I'm feeling?
Yeah.
What is the emotion that I'm feeling? What's the mental activity going on? And through the exploration of that, then the sexual beauty comes in.
Yeah, like the sense connection.
Hello? Is that God?
Tap, 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 tap. That's it. He's like, you're hitting the nail.
You're hitting that nail.
You're hitting the nail. Yeah, that was it. Because, like, since, the body is a beacon. The body is the space where intuition resides. It's not in the mind, it's in the body. And the body is always sending signals. And so the process of attuning to that also helps me attune to your signals, which becomes a big part of our everyday dialogue. And when we talk conscious intimacy, that's a part of it, right? Being attuned. So I can tell when there's subtle shifts and express it and bring it up in a way that creates authentic connection for us. So there aren't things that are being buried. There's no resentment being built. And we both continue to enforce the foundation that, like, you are safe here. And I love that about our connection.
Yeah, me too. Like, the conscious intimacy transcends the bedroom. It's like the bedroom is a chapter of that, but really it's the conscious intimacy that is the relationship.
It's a juicy chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it's a very juicy chapter. Wow.
Yes. Very wet chapter.
Yeah.
Owning it.
Yeah, totally owning it. I love it. I'm a mess sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time. And I'm thankful for that, and I think that's also, like, for what feels like the first time in my life I'm in an experience where that is a constant. And what that's teaching me is like me squirting, for instance. I don't know if I can say that on the podcast. We'll see.
You can.
We'll see. Me having that experience for me proves to me like my body is open and receptive because there's really no way I feel like that could happen unless there's like a certain stimulation maybe, but just in general our experience sexually I feel very open, and it's been that way from the beginning because there's been this like innate layer of trust that we have. I mean, we saw like our first time you over at the house, this is when we were in Tulum, he was like, oh my God, there's a tarantula outside. And it freaked me out at first, but then after you left to come back to Mexico City, which is where we are now, I looked it up. I was like, what is the spiritual meaning of a spider? And one of the things was trust. So I was like, And I remember feeling ease in my body. It was like, okay, spirit, like, cool. I'm going to choose to trust this also. I'm going to choose to listen to the signs and trust. Because my intuition was already saying that things were okay. But I remember my mind being like, well, I don't know. Like, let's kind of sit with this a little bit. Let's keep like asking questions and see what's actually here. And I think naturally we both just proved, if I want to air quote, that this was a safe space.
Yes. Yeah. I felt that the first night that we spent together. Like, for me, what I've recognized in myself when it comes to sexual connection is that I won't drop into sexual connection if I don't trust that person, if I don't feel safe. And I felt this implicit safety with you. And I think it's, so quickly as well, considering how little time we'd spent before really connecting. And that spoke volumes to me. And I think that's because at the heart of our relationship were those pillars before we formalized them. Was this trust? Was this honesty, communication? Was all of these elements that they were just there, and it allowed us to get to a deeper level of intimacy in a phenomenally quick time.
So fast. I remember that conversation that we had before Sex.Prayers even landed. We had just like dropped into a talk portal for like 3 hours. And I remember coming out of it, it was like 2 a.m. and we're like, where the fuck did time just go? Yeah. And being like, wow, it felt like we had done 6 months of relating in such a small window. It was like we were very vulnerably sharing our fears. We were sharing past relationship patterns that we knew to be true about ourselves. We were bearing our hearts with each other about past relationship pains. And the thing that I loved about that conversation was like, you would show up in a vulnerability and you would share something with me about a past pattern or a past way of being, for instance, like people pleasing. And rather than like me take any of that on or assume that I've got to rescue you or whatever, it was like, okay, amazing. Thank you for sharing that with me. Like, how can I support you in that, in not being that? And we got to have such a healthy dialogue around like what it would look like to support each other in ensuring that should those patterns show up, which inevitably they do and have and will, we know how to approach that situation with like love and empathy, another one of our pillars, and compassion, and just like hold that space so we're not trying to fix each other. We're offering support and a reflection and like a shoulder if we need it to allow ourselves to have the moment and then like grow from that.
And I mean, that's one of the things I love about this relationship so much is that we're honest with our challenges and supportive with each other in them. It's like, okay, well, we know this is there. We know it will show up. We know we're not trying to save each other. We're just creating space, holding for the other person to figure those things out. And they do. And very quickly.
Very quickly. It's so nice. Even to just be like, I'm having a moment. Maybe I know what I need. And then I can vocalize that, right? Or if I don't know what I need, that gets to be okay too. You don't assume responsibility to try to make me feel better. But what I love about you is like, how can I be of service? You know, like you check in and ask, because if there was something that I needed, I know that you would want to provide that. You've made that so clear, and vice versa, I feel like.
like the other, was it yesterday or no, it was yesterday. I had some stuff lingering, and you know, you're very sensitive to my energy and vice versa. And you knew it was there, and I knew you knew it was there, and I knew it was there. And you asked me what I needed, and I knew that I was safe to share things with you, but I didn't feel like I wanted or needed to. I wanted to be able to deal with that stuff independently. And I was grateful that you understood that and supported that and were patient with me to do that.
Yeah, and you did.
Yeah.
You know, it was amazing. That's what I love. We talk about like self-resourcing, and in one of these podcasts we'll talk about emotional hygiene and like how to manage that. But this is just like such a great example where I could see that in past relationships I would try to mother the issue. You know, what can I do? Oh my God, are you okay? Is it me? Can I do this in any time that maybe you just wanted to deal with it on your own? I would take that as a rejection, you know, if this was a relationship from my past. And to feel that sense of sovereignty in this connection is really beautiful because my truth is like I don't want to take it on. If I'm like super honest in relationships, I don't want to take on my partner's shit. I want them to figure it out, and then if they can't, then I'm here to be that soundboard, you know. But it also just gave me permission. Like past relationships, I would hold on to that energy, and I would feel that like dissonance, and everything would just feel like mucky, and my whole day would shift and change because of it. Whereas now it's like, great, I'm gonna go do my own thing. Like I've got art to paint. I've got client calls. Yeah. Like that's on you. Amazing.
And I love the trust and belief you have in me to be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's like you recognize that I have the capacity to go and self-resource and self-soothe, and you don't need to worry about me.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't want that.
No, of course not.
But I want to be babied in the relationship. Love me. Yeah, please.
Care for me.
This is the wrong way.
So the question that came up for me when you were saying that was the difference you recognizing yourself now compared to what you would have done or been in previous relationships. Do you think that is because you have changed, because I am different, or the combination of the two?
Definitely combination. It's caliber of person, right? And so why I feel like this relationship has been so successful and so deep and so transformative from the beginning was that we both met each other on the same level. Like we knew what we wanted, commitment was it. We knew we wanted to explore like tantra and sex and our sexuality. I was already on that journey of like sensuality and erotic energy. And so having that alignment was really, really important. And being able to meet each other in that energy, of course, is so supportive. Sure. You know, if in previous relationships, I can see some specifically where it's like, there wasn't an alignment there, but we would try to make it work. But then that dissonance always just ended up getting the best of us because we weren't really connected in the first place, and we weren't able to grow at the same rate. Yeah, essentially.
I mean, if there's a misalignment there, then it will make itself known at some point.
Totally. Rather quickly.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, considering the depth of relating and intimacy we've gone through in the period of time that we have, I mean, it feels like it's at least 6 months to a year's worth of a normal time relationship.
Yeah.
And so to me, it indicates like the strength and potency of what's existing between us. And all of the stuff that you said about why this is in alignment, and we both had this affinity towards divine element. Like it's a part of who we are, who we show up in the world, and part of our sexuality too.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could be with someone who didn't appreciate or understand or embody that as well, because it's such a significant aspect.
Yeah, it's such a big part of the way that we relate, you know, because it's like, mm, it's spiritual. Life is so
Yeah.
spiritual, and sex is so spiritual, and the, you know, procreation is so fucking spiritual.
Yeah.
It's the most cosmic thing,
Yeah.
you know, and so I feel like if I was in a relationship where somebody denied that
Yeah.
or couldn't meet me in that aspect of things, it would be very, very challenging. But we're both like, no, divinity is a massive element
Yeah.
of relating, of our purpose, our dharma, our path, and is it everything? And are we like super woo? No,
No.
definitely not. But we do set intention to connect in that energy.
Yes. Well, for me, this is like, it's the combination of prayer and sex. It's the divine meets the immediate, tangible, sensual.
Yeah.
It's the combination of the two, and that's for me why sex prayers is so powerful. It's it's not the it's not being ignorant to the power of sexual connection. I mean, it's literally the power to create life. You can't get more God than that, right? You can't.
Yeah, so true.
And it's embracing the sensual, intrinsic nature of the human experience. And that's the beauty of the two, and for me, that's the beauty of this practice. It's why it feels so powerful, and why conscious intimacy feels so good as well.
Yeah, I'd love for us to talk a little bit about conscious intimacy because I know that when Sex.Prayers landed, we're like, okay, Sex.Prayers is like the Mecca, right? It's like the top of the pyramid. And how do we communicate what Sex.Prayers is, but also like meet people maybe where they're at and explain the whole experience? And what showed up for us was conscious intimacy. So like conscious intimacy are the building blocks that allow Sex.Prayers to be the sensual, spiritual, erotic energy that it is. And when we were talking about conscious intimacy, this word pillars kept coming up for us. And we've been talking about it a little bit. And we were really thinking like, well, what are the pillars of conscious intimacy?
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to, maybe you want to share about them.
So we have 5 pillars.
Yeah, we started with 4. But then we originally, at some point, we're like, oh, there's this piece that is definitely an element that feels all-encompassing. And so it became like, that's the foundation.
It's the foundation.
And then there's the 4 pillars.
Yeah. So the foundation for us is play.
Play. I love playing with you.
Yeah.
I love playing with you.
I adore playing with you.
It's so good.
Well, I feel like 95% of our relationship is playful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like whether
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, whether it be in the kitchen or on the sofa, in the bedroom, outside, like
brushing my teeth, like yeah, we're always just in play.
Yeah, and I feel like if that's not to say you can't be playful and serious at the same time. I feel like there's an element, it's an intrinsic part of it. You can be serious and show up in the world in seriousness, but at the heart of it, there's this playful, for me, like the only word I have for it for myself, I think you came up for a better word for it when we were doing those qualities, but it's this flirtatiousness with life. It's charismatic nature to being. And that felt like the bedrock of what the pillars are built on. Because it felt like for each pillar, playfulness was intrinsic in it.
Yeah.
Which is why it wasn't its own pillar.
It's like the piece that you can always return to. And I like that. It's like the home base, but like you're saying, that doesn't mean that seriousness can't exist, or that it's like, this is like, okay, no more playing, like we're having a serious conversation. But to be able to come back to the polarity that exists in play felt really crucial in our exploration of what this is.
Well, for me, like playfulness encompasses an open curiosity to exploring what is. It's not like comedy or like lightheartedness. It's just being yeah, exploring what's there, and that's that playful, like children, right?
Yeah.
The
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
So children are intrinsically curious. They're always playing. Whatever they're doing, it's this sense of discovering the world and discovering what's there, and to have that quality felt like a beautiful foundation for building everything.
Yeah, play being that like inherent quality that you can return to. And yeah, maybe even I mean I love the idea of play, but at the root of play there's curiosity.
Yes.
And I think that curiosity is the piece that can be so supportive for relationships. So when challenges arise, shifting into that, how can I be curious about
Yes.
this energetic and what's
Yeah.
in front of me and your experience
Yeah.
and how it impacts my experience, all of it, right? That piece feels so foundational because I feel like it operates as a potential reset button. It's like, we're experiencing some charge here, and maybe it's impacting you, maybe it's impacting me, rather than assume responsibility for it, rather than take it in and internalize it or project it. When I can go back into a state of curiosity, it actually creates ease in my nervous system, which is like, oh, maybe it actually isn't about me, right? We're so conditioned to be selfish, like it's about me. Like, maybe this situation actually isn't about me. Maybe it's his own experience. Maybe he is capable of going through it on his own. Maybe I just need to go over here and take a break and regulate, right? Curiosity gives me the opportunity to regulate my nervous system, take a fucking breath, like reset and go, okay, how can I approach this situation with curiosity so I can better understand your experience?
Yeah, I love that, because what that says to me is through the curiosity and returning to curiosity, it's the dropping of the stories and returning to what I call God consciousness of that curiousness. It's like what's actually occurring here?
Like, what is the truth?
Yeah, what is the truth?
Subjective.
Yeah,
Of what's happening.
But then then the pillars come on top of that, right?
Yeah.
So, you've gone back to this playful curiosity. And then it's, for me, first pillar is truth. It's like, what is true in this experience? What's actually occurring? Not the story that I'm projecting, creating, manifesting, putting into the world, but what's the actual sensory input that I'm getting?
And embodiment helps with this, right? Being attuned is such a big piece of this trust piece.
Yeah.
Trusting self, trusting other, trusting capacity, emotional resilience, all of it.
It's the difference between you hurt me and I felt hurt by what you did.
Yeah.
It's one is a story based and one is I'm feeling something.
Yeah. I'm noticing a sensation that doesn't feel pleasant and I'd like to express it.
Yeah.
It came from an action that happened.
Yes.
It just already that's like, there's just clarity even in that. And we haven't even got to any.
And there's
discussion.
there's truth in that, because you're in saying it that way, it's taking ownership of that thing. It's not, outward facing. This is my experience right now, and I'd love to explore that.
Yeah, I love that. That's a radical self-responsibility.
Yeah.
Piece that every relationship has to have that. Codependency is out, y'all. Codependency is out. It was cute for a while, and then we learned that it just destroys everything, and we have to be responsible for our actions, right? Nobody's a victim. Sovereignty, right? Like owning our actions and owning our experiences. And oh my gosh, just sometimes the liberation that comes from that. It's a bit edgy. Like radical self-responsibility is sometimes, at least in my experience, has been the ugliest mirror where I'm like, whoa, okay.
Well, I think it's for me, it's like an intrinsic part of being a human being. It's taking ownership of your own experience. And then from that ownership, that truth with self, with experience, then comes truth with other through communication.
Yeah.
It's being able to express what's being experienced.
Yeah, calmly, confidently. I mean, there is space for those more reactionary responses also.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
just like
totally.
communication, just having the lines of communication open. And this is a big piece of conscious intimacy. So it's like, well, how can I communicate my needs in a way that is radically self-responsible, is not projecting onto the other person.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, I'm calm about it, but sometimes that emotion's not always available to us in the moment. Like we have reactionary
And that's
tendencies.
allowed.
That's allowed, right? Which is also why the communication piece is so important, because should that happen, right? Should I get triggered and in the moment I react and it come out harsh or with a nasty tone or whatever it is, my ability to then, after I've sat with it and calmed myself and reset my nervous system to be able to go, I had a moment earlier and I know that that impacted you and I want to bring awareness to it because I was not in a state to actually start talking about that.
Yeah.
Right? To even have the communication and the emotional intelligence to be able to use my communication to go, before, not my best form, right? I was not really in my best. I was a little bit sassy. I was a little bit rude. I was a little bit like cutting, and it was never my intention. But in the moment, blah 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 blah. To even be able to like, that's such a humble thing to do in connection.
Yeah, and I feel like that's, for me, that speaks into the third pillar of trust.
Yeah.
It's going, well, I trust you to figure that stuff out, and I know that it's not about me, and you're just communicating in the way you know best right now. And I trust you to there's an implicit trust that exists in conscious intimacy of being vulnerable and going through that communication.
The communication builds that sense of trust, right? Through the vulnerability, through the exposure of ourselves. I mean, I don't really like the term like weakest moments, but yeah, maybe in our most vulnerable moments, our infraction points, right? Like that I can show up in that as myself fully, even if it's not the best version of myself, I still express it. Like expressing is, to me, is better than not expressing, provided there's like a level of conscious awareness there.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody like dialing themselves down or internalizing things because we can be our own worst demons, you know. Our own, was it antagonist in a book? Is it antagonist? Yeah. But yeah, just having that communication piece build trust. And trust also comes from our fourth pillar, which is empathy, right? Our ability to empathize with each other.
Yeah. It's so when I'm trying to express what empathy means to me, I feel like the rest is fairly self-evident. Empathy for me is the ability to understand in my body what it is you're experiencing.
I like that.
Yeah. It's I don't have to own your pain, but I can understand it and I can appreciate it. And to me, that's what empathy is. It's a recognition of what it is that you're experiencing.
And I feel like empathy really fosters connection in general, but definitely deeper connection, because I don't need your pity that I'm having a hard time. I don't need you to fix that I'm having a hard time. But just, at least in my experience, what I've noticed is that when you can show up and, so let's say I've had a hard day and I'm expressing that, it's like maybe you've had an amazing day. Just the ability to empathize and be like, oh, maybe I can see that that's like challenging you and that it's like really wearing you out. Just like, oh, I feel ease. That's like, okay, I'm being heard. I feel like empathy really leads to like, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel expressed. Yeah. There's no action that needs to be taken.
Right.
Just the active listening was all I needed. Yeah. And somebody to say, it's okay. You're doing great. Whatever.
Yeah. It's, I love what you said there. It's not about trying to solve the problem. And it's not about trying to ignore the problem. It's about an acknowledgement of whatever has gone on for you and a willingness to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are our pillars.
Those are our pillars. So it's trust.
Well, play is the foundation.
Play is the foundation, has home base. That's the concrete, right? Play / curiosity.
Then trust.
Trust, communication.
Communication.
Empathy.
It was
and truth.
Truth and truth. Yeah, truth.
Truth, yeah.
Truth and empathy.
Truth and empathy. And those feel like the building blocks of conscious intimacy, which is like, yeah, if you were to visualize Sex.Prayers as like a pyramid, it's like play is you think of the food pyramid, right? Play and curiosity is the bottom. These 4 pillars stack up, or like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That eventually these pillars can feed into deeper intimacy, not only in relationship, like sacred union or in romantic partnership, but I feel like this shows up in friendships. This shows up in relationship to self. Like if I do not trust myself, it's going to be so challenging to trust you. And honestly, at least in my previous experience, when I would engage in that, I was lying to myself because I was putting my safety in other people's hands who could or could not hold it, right? It was a gamble.
Right.
And at some point, just defeated relationships or connections, I was like, I can't do this. I have to really learn this like inner stability piece. And these pillars showed up in my life, just in my own personal practice without naming them.
Yeah. Like for me, this speaks into the importance of conscious intimacy, primarily in relation to self and then in relation to other.
Yeah.
Like it's not just in partnership, but in all relationships.
Yeah, in all relationships.
And the first and only lifelong relationship all of us have is the one with ourselves.
So true.
So this foundation of conscious intimacy being, essentially conscious intimacy is what I've been working on for myself. And I think really what you've been working on for yourself.
Yeah.
And now we've come together and recognized that, you're the same.
You're a consciously intimate person.
Yeah. Oh, and now we can actually, is this recognition and then a thinking of going, well, what's actually going on here? Like, how is this working so well? Mm-hmm. And actually deconstructing what's at the heart of that, which is this conscious intimacy piece, and why it's so valuable to us, and why we're doing this, and why we're sharing this.
Yeah.
Is because without it, this wouldn't work.
Yeah, it wouldn't. And I really believe that. It's just like, it would be more than challenging, It's like when you date somebody or you connect intimately with someone and you kind of feel it's off, but you're like, it might be okay. Like, even that company. In that moment, right? That's like shaky foundation. It's like, I don't know, fuck it.
I'm not doing
maybe.
Anything else.
Yeah, I was like, fuck it. It's just not sustainable.
No.
That type of energy is not sustainable. And honestly, it wears on the heart, when I would enter into relationships that I was in that same kind of like, no, I don't,
there's enough there.
Yeah, like, it works for now, right? Just even having that like tone of voice is like shaky. It's like, maybe, I know this person doesn't want the same things as me, but maybe it'll be fine for now, right? Self-sacrificing right there. That also would inhibit my ability to trust myself because I was making decisions and taking actions that I knew were out of alignment, but in the moment, chances are it was like my need for something overcame my discernment and my commitment to myself to say, realistically, this could be fun, this could be exciting, it could be thrilling, but at the end of the day, that's really not what you want. Talking to myself, what I wanted. And
would you say that in those instances, in those past relationships, there was a severing of conscious intimacy with self? Because you're not being honest with yourself, you're not communicating honestly with yourself, you're not empathizing with your actual needs.
Mm-hmm. Totally. In those situations, like, let's be real here, totally lying to myself, right? Trying to make it work is different when you're trying to make it work out of the gate, right? Like, that's, to me, that feels like a yellow cautionary flag. Whereas it's different when you move into a conscious relationship and everything is beautiful and then challenge comes. It's like, oh, okay, I have to go back to those tools. But if I'm not honoring those tools, those pillars for myself from the get-go, whatever would make me assume that at some point I could just kind of slowly stick those in and box this relationship into the thing that I need it to be for me. It was never going to be that. And there's an ownership piece there that was like, wow, I actually really rejected myself when I put myself in those environments, because if I'm not able to trust myself, putting my trust in the hands of somebody else is like relationship suicide, right? It's martyrdom. If I'm not communicating my needs now, what makes me feel like I'll be safe to communicate my needs later in a healthy way?
Sure. I mean, in doing so, you're sacrificing your sovereignty.
Exactly. I'm just like, oh, I'll dim. I'll take out a piece of my consciousness or my awareness to meet somebody else where they are, and just I'll convince myself that I'm okay and that it's okay and this is fine, right? But one thing I'm learning is like, fine is not okay, and okay is not great or exceptional, and it's like on the spectrum of things that I would like to bring me pleasure. Okay and fine are like the feeling I have right now where I'm sick and kind of congested. I was like, I feel fine, but like I'm not alive.
Right. So so those are things that you've done previously.
Mm-hmm.
And why do you think people do that? What do you think is missing? Like, because I would imagine, and you know, I'm the same. I'm not the only person that does that or has done that. And if that's the case, then, you know, part of this is inviting those people who are in that position, who do have that pattern, to figure out what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you... Is it the pillars?
More than the pillars, you know, the like embodiment comes up for me right away. This embodiment piece, because when a person is embodied, they stand firm, right? They stand firm in their boundaries. They know the signs and signals. This embodiment piece comes up for me first because, like, when we're embodied, we really stand firm in our beliefs, in our values. And so having this piece that allows us to take a stand for our needs and take a stand for even who we are feels like a big piece for me. And I really feel like that's just rooted in self-love. And so whether that's intimacy with self, it's like, like I knew those things about me and I knew what my needs were, but I decided that maybe I didn't need them as much as I thought I did, right? But the needs were still there.
Right.
And so for me, that was just a piece of, there was like a piece of embodiment that was missing there. It's like, well, I know I need it, but why can't I take a stand for it? And I think rooted even deeper into that was like an insecurity. And maybe it was coming from a place that's like, I don't know, like love is coming at me from this direction. Maybe I should just like take it, right? Like I'm not really going to New York City, but maybe I'll take the subway anyways. Like I wasn't planning on it, but I'll just go there. It kind of felt like an energy like that. That's like, oh, well, rather than stand for myself and risk this potential experience, whatever it has for me, I'm just going to choose to go on that journey anyways. And for me, there's no wrongs. I think a lot of people beat themselves up for past relationships or past choices that they've made and try to make it wrong, or maybe internally shame themselves. And I did that for a while, and I really just learned, like, every relationship that I've been in, even if it was a quote-unquote wrong turn, right? There really are no wrong turns, because it continued to validate the infraction points or the holes that I had in my self-worth that I needed that relationship to mirror that to me so I could heal that on my own.
Yeah. To make it show up, like, in a way that you can't ignore it.
Exactly. Like Dark Night of the Soul, you know, like, oh my God. So yeah, it's like embodiment. It's an internal sense of safety, really knowing myself and knowing my needs and knowing how to communicate those effectively and knowing how to take a stand for myself. And then also insecurity. was somewhere rooted in there that's like, oh, maybe if I don't get love here, I don't know how long it's going to be till this next person comes up. And what if that person's not right for me either? Like, what if I'm just alone forever? Just that kind of energy.
So it's like some things come along, it's not really what I want, but I'm afraid to let it slip by. And so I'm going to see if I can fashion it into what I need, but not in a conscious way.
The thing that's coming up for me right now is it feels like jester energy, or like the Joker energy.
Okay.
Where I could look at a relationship and go, I don't really think this is the right fit. But then the jester would show up and go, but it could be. But you never know, it could be. And it would cause this like voice of doubt in what my intuitive knowing was already saying. That was like, well, do we want to play with this energy? And then I would decide yes or no. But even that like little jester that's like, he, let's go down this road, like let's heal this part of you, because it's not healed yet, would allure me in these other directions. So it's like I already knew what I needed, and had I stood for it in the moment and just like trusted myself and trusted that that was the right decision for me, I could have taken it. But then there's this, this voice that comes online that's just like, well, what if? What if it's actually the most amazing relationship of your life? Do you really want to turn it down? And that little infraction of doubt that's like, well, maybe I should go down this road, could tip the scales one way or the other. Sometimes I was like, no, boys. No, I've been here before. No, thank you. I do not need to go down this path. Other times, not so much. Just because of the person, or maybe because of where I was at. Maybe I was in a vulnerable state. Maybe I was lonely. It could be anything. Like, I'm curious if you've had similar experiences, and what you would answer to that question.
My experiences have been, I guess, ultimately grateful to have someone show interest in me, that I've blinded myself to the things that aren't in alignment. That I've been willing to ignore the things that have presented themselves, or just not even been privy to considering them fully, because so consumed by the newness of it, and wasn't. I mean, when I have gone into, I'm not someone who jumps into a relationship. I'm not someone who jumps into anything. Typically, this was different. Which was why it felt so powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, this is very out of character for me, but I was actually able to sit with it and go, no, this is right. And I think that's what was missing before, is the conscious awareness piece of actually considering what it is that I want and being attuned to my needs. And, as a very self-sacrificing individual in the past, I'm not even going to consider what it is that I want in a healthy aspect, but just be of service.
Because you're happy you're in a relationship.
Sure.
Right? You're being chosen.
Essentially. I get to show my affection. I get to exhibit that part of me. And there wasn't this... What was missing really was the conscious intimacy with myself and going, what is it that I actually value? What is it that I actually want? Who is it I actually consider myself to be? And what is it I'm looking for in a partner? And without having done all of that, then there's no surprise that I dropped into relationships that ultimately were misaligned. Having worked on intimacy with myself in a conscious way, I was able to recognize when something valuable and reciprocal was staring me in the face quite literally. And that for me has been the difference.
And it feels like that's what kickstarted both of our energies. You know, it was like not really looking for anything, kind of in our own independence. Mm-hmm. You were doing trainings and I was teaching, and so it was like, oh, okay, wow. And then our paths crossed, and yeah, just feeling that spark of energy and just chemistry. We naturally had chemistry, but it was like honestly that playful energy, and then even date one dropping into like deep emotional spaces, just vulnerable. Like we weren't crying or anything.
We were honest.
Yeah, we were honest, and I remember feeling like, fuck, this is so refreshing to get to have this conversation, and not only just to have it and express myself, but to have somebody think and feel and desire the same things. That I could feel how that would immediately start to open my heart up. And then eventually, like, us being in that space repeatedly and continuing to hold that frequency then continued to open my body, which then moved us into Sex Prayers, right? Like, we had this like really beautiful opening ceremony, our love portal ceremony, and that the experiences that I had there were transcendent. They were so transcendent, and it was this feeling of my whole body being open, no walls, no guards, no defense mechanisms, nothing like that. And I had this moment where I was crying, and I've talked about this story on Instagram Live and on my own lives about having this vision of a tether, and the tether was so thick and it was really long. Like, I remember in my vision, I couldn't see where the tether ended. It was so far. And I was crying for that because I could feel how deep my longing for this type of connection was. And in that, I felt all the pain that I experienced from settling for things that I knew were not that connection. And having that openness and that freedom with you really created space for that whole tether to dissolve. Whether it was you, whether it was me, whether it was God, whether it was divine timing, right? Whether it was all of it, all encompassing. I remember seeing that. I cried for that tether because I could feel the longing. And then it was like, as I addressed it and I allowed myself to surrender to it, it just completely dissolved. You know, it was like, I don't have to carry that longing like a weight. I don't have to carry that protection or that armor like a weight around anymore. And more than your presence, which was supportive, it was a choice that I got to make for myself that was like, you know what? For whatever cosmic divine reason, this is the moment that I get to leave all that aside. And I remember bringing you into that experience afterwards and sharing that with you. And it was just like, again, just like you holding that. It's like, oh my gosh, wow, you know, and me getting emotional over that experience. It was like, oh my God, I literally felt weight come off of my body. And I remember vocalizing to you, it was like, I've been, even without recognizing that I was still carrying armor or shields around, because there was a part of me that doubted my ability to trust myself because I was so caught up in past proof points that I didn't show up for myself. So the fear was that I was never going to show up for myself. I was always going to make the bad decision or the wrong decision out of fear or out of scarcity. And
so it was your good decision.
Yeah.
And the surrender that you had, like that was,
oh my God, it's next level.
That was the dissolution of the tether, right?
Yeah, the dissolution of the tether
came from the surrender.
And it was like that. I mean, that tether had such a grip on me. Like the tether and the longing that I had was so strong that I really do believe it had impact into why I made the decisions that I made in previous relationships where I would self-sacrifice because my longing for love rather than safety, but I think safety was a big part of it too. I longed for safety. I used to just outsource that.
Yeah.
And being able to be in a space where I felt like you had no expectation of me. You had no ulterior motive with me. It was so clear that your intentions were pure and that you were open and that you were honest, that was like a breath of fresh air. I got to have this deep breath and just fully let myself go in my connection to you, but also in that moment, which was like in sex, was like, oh, and then just having these like transcendental experiences, and orgasms and all of these things. I was just like, our whole evening was like so beautiful, and that was even towards the beginning of our ceremony. It wasn't that far into it.
Yeah.
It just like, for me, it set the tone for myself and our relationship. I was like, well, I'm going to hold this standard. And I knew in some way that you could also hold it and that you were committed to holding that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the majority of people want conscious intimacy with themselves, even if they don't consciously realize it, and in partnership.
I feel like if it's not, maybe this is not correct, but if it's not there in partnership, chances are it's because it's lacking internally.
Yes.
You know? And I see how new relationships can struggle. I see how marriages can struggle. I see how people in family dynamics struggle with that. I mean, bring kids into the mix, it's a whole other journey you're going on.
Yeah.
And so having and wanting and desiring to come back to that self-love practice of being consciously intimate with ourselves is so key.
Yeah, and for me, this, as a studier, practitioner of tantric philosophy, like, this is the heart of it. It's at our core as human beings. We have this innate yearning for what we're calling conscious intimacy with self, with essentially God, with other. And it's not denying that, and it's acknowledging it and stepping into it and allowing it to bloom and flourish and be all the yumminess that it is. Because in doing that, that's where all the pleasure of life comes in a most aligned and healthy way.
Conscious intimacy feels like radical self-love, right? Which essentially, like, even in Tantra, it's like, oh, you have the ability to eradicate your suffering.
Yes.
Should you go inside and excavate and come back to that one universal tether, which is love, right? Like, love alleviates everything. And so I feel like, of course, the human condition, this came up when we had like our little LSD trip, like, we're in some ways inherently conditioned away from that, and it breeds this sense of needing to outsource so that other can provide something that for some reason we don't feel capable, safe, or secure enough to provide ourselves. And I feel like that's what it is. It's like conscious intimacy is radical self-love, because with these pillars you cannot do any wrong, right? When you embody the pillars and you show up for each of them fully, there's nothing but benefit that comes from that space. Even if it comes with an edge, or even if it's not the answer that we want to hear, it's the truth. And it's because we're so solid in those pillars, which are our values, essentially.
Yeah, I love that when you say you can't do wrong with it. Ideally, I mean, I haven't thought that through. I'm going to think that through and see if it's bulletproof. If these pillars are bulletproof. I have the feeling that they are, but yeah, I think that's a really nice sentiment.
Well, it feels like, I mean, if a core pillar is truth, and you operate the other pillars based off of that.
Yeah.
I'm like, you really can't, right? Like, as long as you own your truth, which, like, yeah, of course, truth is subjective for every person, but as long as I'm owning my truth in the moment, which can change at any moment, right? My truth, which is true now, might not be true for me tomorrow or 30 minutes from now, but owning it is the core piece. That's as long as I own it and I own my experience through that radical responsibility, there are no wrong moves that I can make. There are decisions that lead to outcomes. Maybe they're desired, maybe they're less than desirable. But to say that any of those experiences or label any of those experiences as wrong, incorrect, or anything like that, I feel like does a disservice to
Sure.
our sovereignty.
Well, yeah. So from a tantric point of view, like there's no such thing as wrong or bad. It's merely a case of level of ignorance. So all emotion is allowed because it exists. Like
It's alive. I mean,
right, yeah. Good and bad is a human attribution to something.
I mean, it's a man-made label.
It's a label.
It's a construct, yeah.
Right. Like the universe is neither good nor bad. It just is.
Totally. Sensations just are.
Right. And it's then not a case of is something good or bad, but how honest am I being in this, or what's my ignorance to the actuality of what is?
Yeah. I feel like life is our greatest teacher. You know, every moment we're receiving information, and we have willpower to do what we want with it, in theory. I mean, as we move into other theories, it's a little bit different. But having the ability to be with life and be in that dance of life, and I feel like this kind of takes us full circle, and treating life as a prayer, you know, even in that regard, my wrongdoings, quote unquote, were never wrong. They were all destined to point me in a stronger, greater, more clear, more stable direction. For me, God bless those relationships. Like, thank you so much. Even the ones that were so challenging, that broke me down, thank you for breaking me, because I remember having this moment where I felt like I saw myself in pieces on the floor, like in millions of pieces, and I was ugly girl sobbing. Like, I was desperate sobbing, praying to God, okay, I will do whatever you tell me to do. I do not ever want to feel this way ever again in my life. Like, what do I do? And I remember having this vision of like wanting to grab all of the pieces and like put them back together. I was like, oh my God, I don't even know who I am. Like, how am I even gonna put this like shattered person back together? And I remember getting such a clear message that it's like, you get to decide what you want to keep and how you want to put it back together.
Right.
And that felt like the most empowering, pivotal moment of that healing journey, because it's true. Like, I do get to decide how I want to show up in the world.
All of those pain points became vehicles for the removal of ignorance and the attunement to conscious awareness. Yeah. That's what that is.
Totally. And I can see how the journey from there in relating, of course, those pain points would reemerge as often as they needed to ensure that I'm not going to break down, that I'm strong enough to get through it and to pivot. It's all about pivoting, you know,
and it's finding the prayer in that, the communion with that which exists beyond self. Yeah. In self, through, you know, like that's the sexual aspect of it, the divine creativity in it. Yeah. The divine play.
Yeah. It's all for me.
It's all sex prayers. It's all sex prayers.
Yeah. It's all sex prayers. I'm having sex with my life. Having so much sex with life. Life does turn me on, actually, and life brings me a lot of pleasure. So that's not a false statement. That's actually a very true statement for me. That's
the point. That's the point. That's the sex
life is
press.
fucking me, and I'm fucking it, baby. I love it. We are making cosmic love all the time. Sometimes it does me hard and dirty. Sometimes it does me soft and slow. And
you're like here for all of it.
I'm here for all of it. I want to be here for all of it. Right. I want to experience the totality of what life has to offer.
Exactly.
So why would I not offer myself? All
wonderfully juicy.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're juicy.
Ah, thank you. You're about to be juicy.
Wow. I'm feeling it now.
That feels complete for me.
Yeah, that feels really good.
Cool.
What a beautiful journey.
Yeah. Thank you for going on that journey with me.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Wow, cheers to the beginning of Sex.Prayers, our first episode, Conscious Intimacy and Our Pillars. Yes. It's going to go so many places from here. I know some of our talks are on sex and psychedelics.
Yes.
Emotional hygiene.
Uh-huh.
We had a piece that was on sovereignty.
Polarity.
Polarity, masculine, feminine energetics.
Can you be too honest?
Vulnerable.
Vulnerable, as in
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability and masculinity and
Yeah.
femininity. Lots for us to discuss and talk about. I'm excited.
Yeah, I love this so much.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
What an amazing day.
Sacred pause.
Sacred pause.
Sacred pause.
Sacred pause is a massive part of our relationship.
We'll get to that in
We'll
a
edit
moment.
that out. We'll edit this out.